Facebook. Technology has come to the bar. It's an exciting place. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Becky McMahon. I'm the Executive Director here at the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association. And as people continue to filter in, I want to say a great big thank you for making time to come over. I know it's a little gray and gloomy and cold outside, but I guarantee you with this lineup that we have, it's going to be well worth the effort to get over here. Our Hot Talks started in February of this year, and they came about at a time when there were all kinds of noisy discussions happening across our country about a variety of different topics. And we wanted to create an opportunity for people to come together to engage in civil but constructive conversation on topics that are of real relevance and real importance. And I have to say, last month, for those of you that were here, we did a conversation on the opioid crisis. And just as I was walking in this morning from the meeting, I found out that a good friend of mine's 27-year-old daughter, who has been struggling with addiction for years, died yesterday as a result of addiction. It's real, it's happening everywhere in our communities. Rich or poor, black or white, it's everywhere. Unfortunately, today's topic is equally impactful because it is everywhere, human trafficking. And I want to give a thank you, as tough as the subject is, when we started talking about putting together a program in November, Diane Citrino, who is one of our long-term friends and supporters here at the Bar Association, who is also a partner with the law firm of Giffen and Kaminsky, said, I would love to put together a group to talk about human trafficking because it is staggering what is happening. And so even though it's a sobering conversation, we know that there are things that we can do, and it begins with being informed and aware about what's happening in our community. So thank you all for coming today. This group, Diane's going to keep this very interactive. I should say Diane, all three speakers will. I'm not even going to introduce them, they're going to introduce themselves. So they're going to talk for a little bit, and then we're going to create opportunity for question and answer from the audience. So if you brought questions, great. If you don't have questions, we encourage you to get them now. And thanks to those of you who are joining us streaming on Facebook. We would welcome your feedback as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Diane. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all to being here today, and welcome to Hot Topics. We are going to be talking about human trafficking. And I know I didn't know very much at all about human trafficking, and learned that it's not smuggling, which is moving people across the border, but it's a modern day form of slavery. It is having people by force, fraud, or coercion be forced to do some kind of commercial activity, normally divided into two different kinds, sexual exploitation or labor trafficking, so sexual exploitation can be something like prostitution, massages, things like that, whereas labor trafficking can involve agricultural work, it can be nursing home, it's all kinds of different hidden ways that people can be forced through coercion or other means to do work against their will. And it's very widespread, and it's here in Ohio. I was the chair of the Ohio Advisory, and I still am the chair of the Ohio Advisory Committee to the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, and our topic, which we released a report on recently, was about looking at human trafficking in Ohio. We were stunned to learn that Ohio is in the top 5 most prevalent states for trafficking in the United States. The most shocking fact to me was an FBI task force leader talked about the average life expectancy for someone who is in the sex trafficking industry, 7 years. I just could not believe that. So what we are going to do today, we have 2 amazing people here. Right next to me, Kirsty Mounsey is from the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center. She's their program director, and she is working every day and directly on this issue in our community. Teresa Flores is a survivor who went on to become an author, an advocate, and someone who is making a difference every day. She founded SOAP, Save Our Adolescents from Prostitution. And right now I just learned with L'Oreal, she is in the running for a Women of Work award that would bring an additional $25,000 to her organization if she's voted in, and you have until the end of November to vote for her. So there are some cards with the information, but I'm just so excited to run and vote for you, Teresa. This conversation, I'm going to ask, this is going to be very interactive to answer your questions about human trafficking, because one thing that is very obvious is it's a very hidden activity. It's one of the top, besides drugs, it's the largest money-making criminal activity in the world. It raises billions and billions of dollars for criminals. So this is an issue that really touches us in our community and across the world. I'm going to ask each woman now to briefly talk for about 5 minutes about themselves and what they do on this topic. And also, I ask them if there's a myth they could talk about, because I think there's a lot of confusion about human trafficking and what it is and why don't people leave, or a lot of questions. So let's start with you. Go ahead and take it away.
Great, thank you so much. Again, my name is Christy Muncie, and I'm the Chief Program Officer at the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center. And I am too very excited to be here, and I'm really thrilled that you all are giving up your lunch break to talk about such a really difficult topic. And if this is the first time you've ever been introduced to this issue, it can really be really hard to understand and get a grip on what's happening and why it's happening and how is it that it keeps happening. And we haven't been able to resolve this issue. So I am in the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center, which is an organization that's been in our community for over 40 years. And our mission is to serve survivors of sexual violence, to prevent sexual violence from happening, and to create social change. About 10 years ago, we started to work very closely with the Collaborative to End Human Trafficking, because we noticed that we saw victims not only of sexual violence, but of human trafficking. And about 10 years ago was really when that term human trafficking became a real thing and a real issue, and we really recognized that this issue was happening within our community. So about 10 years ago, a little less than that, Cleveland Rape Crisis Center started a program. We were nudged by the community that said, you know, you guys are doing this work already. You need to do something very specifically for trafficking victims. And so Cleveland Rape Crisis Center started Project STAR. Project STAR is our project, Sex Trafficking Advocacy and Recovery, and really focuses on the women and girls in our community that are victims of this crime. And that leads me to my myth that Diane has asked me to share with you, which is this crime really truly happens within our noses. It happens in our everyday lives. We are confronted with victims every day, and we don't know. And so hopefully everyone can walk away today with some knowledge and with heightened awareness of what you might want to look for and who the victims of this horrific crime are. I want to tell you that just before I came here, I looked up our statistics of Project STAR for the year. And what we do primarily with Project STAR is provide victim advocacy. We need girls in prisons, we need girls in the detention centers. We try to really help them leave the life, and we provide long-term counseling for young women and girls who are ready to do that. But often it takes a really long time and long engagement before that even can happen. So some statistics that I pulled for you is that this year to date, Cleveland Rape Crisis Center has served 209 victims of human trafficking, sex trafficking in our case. 209. 98 of those were girls and women. And I think the most shocking statistic of all of what I can offer to you is 50% of the 209 clients were under the age of 18. So over 100 of these clients are young girls between the age of 12 and 17. I think the youngest survivor so far we've seen is right around 11 and 12. That's how early our girls enter the life and become victims of sex trafficking. When I talk local, I really mean local. I don't just mean the city of Cleveland. I mean BC girls from Beechwood, Solon, Independence. There are no barriers to someone becoming a victim. Sex exploitation looks the same globally, and we see pattern and trends everywhere. One of the biggest trends that we see, and one of the biggest commonalities in our girls and women, and again I say girls and women because most of them are people who come to this life with long histories of traumas in their home. Many of our girls, most of them, crave attention and love. They don't have that attention and love at home. And they're being introduced to the life out of desperation. Many of our victims report that they're being treated less than by their families, by social workers, by the system, by police, by the people that they interact with every day. Many of the victims that we work with have been part of the child welfare system, most of them their entire life. They have broken homes, have been adopted, living in foster care. And many of our clients come from extreme poverty. So we do see a large amount of our victims, especially our child victims, are living in poverty and coming from communities of color. So many of these clients enter the life, as I said, out of desperation. And I think we'll talk about this more when we go into the Q&A session on why that happens. And we certainly want to answer the question of why do they stay and why do they not leave. But I'm going to leave that open so we can talk to each other. Teresa, introduce yourself as well.
Thank you. So my name is Teresa Flores. I am a survivor of human trafficking. I think one of the biggest myths that people think is obviously that this happens overseas, not here, and that if it happens to an American, they're kidnapped or held, in a basement. And that's not necessarily the case. A third of all human trafficking victims get trafficked because of a family member. And then 62% are trafficked because of somebody that they know. I am a little bit of a hometown girl as well. My grandfather graduated from John Carroll. I actually have his 1940 Letterman sweater, and then went on to IU and became a very prominent attorney in Indiana. He was actually asked to be the prosecuting attorney for the Nuremberg trials. I am sure that my grandfather never would have imagined that his granddaughter would go through human trafficking. Never. So it's not just impoverished and I don't mean just, but it is not just kids in foster care system. It can literally be anybody. I grew up in a very privileged, family, very educated, and we moved around a lot because of my dad's job. And we ended up moving probably 12 times before I was in high school. And that made me very vulnerable, very lonely, and not have a great support system. I didn't have aunts and uncles that lived in my town. And it was just really a simple situation of a boy that was different, giving me lots of attention. I was 15. And my parents were very strict. We're Irish Catholic, and I wasn't allowed to date. But for me, it was just one simple thing of him asking me if I wanted to ride home from school one day. That changed my life in ways I would never, and anybody would have ever thought. I accepted. I thought it was, great, just a ride home from school, not a date. But he didn't take me home. He took me to his house, and he raped me and drugged me. And I was able to leave and go home that day, which is what surprises a lot of people. And that's not where the trafficking started. The trafficking started a few days later because his associates had been there taking pictures. and then they blackmailed me with these pictures. Today, this would be sexting. It happens all the time, drugging, pictures, things like that. And they knew where my father worked. They knew the price, you know, they knew where I went to church, and said, if you don't earn these back, we're going to spread them everywhere. And it led to 2 years of me trying to be good enough to get them back. I lived at home, and I went to school during the day where they went to school with me as well. So I was always being watched. And it wasn't a simple thing where, like, you know, I could just, you know, tell somebody, tell a teacher, just tell someone. I mean, they threatened to kill my family. They followed my little brothers everywhere. So the threats are so high that you don't know, especially as a kid, how to get out of it. Another myth that I really resonate with is that we think that prostitution is something people choose to do. Nobody would choose to have sex with 6 to 20 men every night of the week, especially a kid, but not even an adult. Nobody would choose that life. So it's really important for you to kind of widen your mind span to think that this is happening all around us in every neighborhood, you know, in the whole Cleveland area. And it can be parents trafficking them, or it could be just a boy, an older guy, that is paying attention to them and tricking them. And it's not easy to just tell somebody.
So you really touched on something, Teresa, which was the it was a form of coercion that you described that I think everybody here can really understand how powerful that is. And I know you probably see that also, Kirsty, in just these ways that people are drugged at times. There are many ways to coerce somebody to do something against their will. Can you talk a little bit about the ways that traffickers, either using immigration status or photos or drugs or blackmail, what are some of the ways that people get victims to comply?
So I think the first thing is that we need to understand that the traffickers are really, really good at finding vulnerabilities. It's really incredible to see how they really understand what vulnerabilities are and how they can harvest them and use them for their advantage. So every time we have a victim, there is a vulnerability. May that be a disability, may that be because of the circumstances that I described earlier, you know, self-worth issues in young girls. If there is a girl, and that's what the FBI says all the time, when traffickers look for victims at the mall, they're going to walk up to them, to girls, and say, hey, you're really pretty today. And a girl that's vulnerable may say, really? You mean I'm pretty? You break me? That's the end. A girl with really strong self-esteem who says, get away, I don't want to talk to you, I don't know who you are, that's not going to be the victim that he or she picks. So we got to start with those vulnerabilities. We've got to know what those vulnerabilities are, and traffickers are really good at using those. And then they start really in a way where it's loving in the beginning. Often girls think, you know, he's the boyfriend, he loves me, he gives me gifts, he takes me out to eat, he pays for my nails, my hair, something my parents can't afford. So it's really this psychological bonding starts often in a very loving way, and a very, you know, genuine for the girls. It feels to the girls very genuine relationship. And then it starts where he's asking things. You know, oh, if you just have sex with my friends, or you just have, you know, you do this for me. I take pictures. You know, I'll put them up on the internet. And then that increases, that need for more ass, and then often what we find is that violence gets introduced. So with first building that loving relationship, building that attachment, and then adding violence, threats, coercions to the relationship, that is what we call a psychological bondage. This is this invisible chains that we talk about, and that's how this relationships unfold over and over again.
Teresa, did you want to add to that?
No, I think she got it great.
So you got away. How'd you do it? How'd you get away? And can you talk about why it's so hard to get away for so
I
many
have
of
a
them?
best-selling book they could read and find out how I got away. It was really a miracle. I was kidnapped one night by this group of guys trafficking me, and taken to an inner city Detroit motel where I was sold all night long. And in the morning, I woke up and I had my clothing. This is my vulnerability moment. I had no clothing, no shoes, not a penny on me, not an ID on me, and no idea where I was. And I was 16 years old, from the good side of town. And I had absolutely no idea what to do. I was stuck. And, you can't just pick up the phone and call your parents and say, come get me. Because they thought I was asleep in bed. And I couldn't disappoint them. And so I found my pajamas and I walked into this little motel diner. And a waitress saw me. And she knew the signs of a kid that was in trouble. Maybe not being trafficked or anything, but she called the police for me and they brought me home that morning. And I remember when the police car pulled up, I remember thinking in my head, especially after what I had just gone through that night, this is what my plan is. I'm going to say, thank you, nice Mr. Policeman, for bringing me home. And I'm going to get out of the car and go around the back of the house where the sliding glass door is still open. And I'm going to sneak back inside and go to bed and nobody will know what happened. And everything will be okay. But that didn't happen. I got out of the car and the parents were there. And they thought I had been a bad kid. I had been out partying. And I didn't tell them any differently. Because the threats were that high to their life and I needed to keep them safe. So it was really a miracle of God that within 4 months from that, my dad got transferred 1,000 miles away to Connecticut, and I was able to escape with my life. Like you said, most don't get to escape, and most will die in this.
Wow, that's just such a powerful story. You had somebody, you said a miracle, somebody intervened, and I know there are a lot of lawyers in this room. I want to know what is it that people can do? And I'd like, Teresa, to start with you. I know you started the SOAP program, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about that. But what are some signs, what are things that people can do that we want to let them know that they can do to make a difference?
Well, I mean, you get this gut instinct. We all have it, but so many times we're like busy and we ignore it, like, oh, I can't be that, or I don't want to be involved. But it is always accurate. And even if it was wrong, who cares? Somebody would have said, Teresa, are you okay? Can I help you? I probably would have said, no, I'm fine. But keep asking, keep at it. Trust that gut instinct that you have. Have you ever, left the movies late at night and you see a young girl in a complete dress standing there just waiting, Do we go right up to her and say, hey, can I help you? Do you need a ride? Do you need something? We don't. And we really need to start to do that. So those are kind of things that I would look for, is that, things that look out of the normal too. I think what else would you ask?
Well, tell us about SOAP.
Oh, SOAP, that's right. So we know that there are over 1 million missing kids in our country today. There's 1.3 million missing and runaway kids. These kids are, within 48 hours, will be approached by a victim or just a trafficker. We know that. We have over 3,500 kids that go missing every month just in Ohio. And so these kids are the vulnerable ones. These are the ones that are going to be put on backpage.com and be sold in our hotels and motels all around this area. That's what happens. That's what this looks like. And so what we do is we get people together to label bars of motel soap with the National Human Trafficking Hotline number on it. And then we team them up and we give them current missing children posters from kids and from this area. And we give every hotel and motel these supplies and we educate them. We have a phenomenal chapter here in Cleveland out of the Holy Angels Church in Chagrin Falls. They go out every month and canvass the area. We had 300 volunteers come for the Republican National Convention, and we go out all of it. And we end up rescuing girls from it. We just had a team go in Columbus, where I'm from, a month ago. And the girls said, hey, do you recognize one of these girls on here? And he said, she just checked in 20 minutes ago with an older guy. And we were then able to call the police and them go and get her. So I'm really proud of how SOAP works. And it's nice because it lets anybody do something about this. 9-year-old kids that label SOAP and 85-year-old retired nuns that label it. And then with the monies that we raise, we have retreats for survivors. A lot of them aren't working because they have felonies. A lot of them can't get jobs, they can't get apartments, and are pretty impoverished. And so with all of the monies that we raise through that, we have to try to heal these women too.
Kirsty, can you talk about some of the rehab and the programs that you work on to try and help? Because obviously the women are pretty traumatized after this experience, or the people, because again, it's not only women, but it is primarily women. So can you talk a little bit about some of the services that you provide at the Great Crisis Center and what other kinds of things that people in this audience might be able to provide?
Absolutely. I think it's really important for us to start by really shifting how we look at the bad kids in our world. Teresa brought it up, and it's something I talked about earlier, that we have this mindset of the bad kids, and this is really, again, a vulnerability that our traffickers prey on, because we believe that they're bad. And so what we see and what we do a lot of work with is in the juvenile detention world. In 2000, Ohio passed the Safe Harbor Law, which really nudged the criminal justice system towards looking at potential victims of trafficking as victims and not as perpetrators or as criminals, right? So before that, what we would see were child prostitutes. And we were somehow okay with that term, child prostitutes, knowing very well that a child under the age of 15 cannot consent to sex. So there is no such thing as child prostitutes. What happened when one guy sold a child and another man bought it, that is rape, right? That is statutory rape. That is not child prostitution. So I think just changing our mindset in regards to that and really thinking about that differently is absolutely one thing we all can do, and really challenge that stigma within our society. And really let's eradicate that word child prostitute, because it's ridiculous. It doesn't exist. But because of that label, many of the young girls that are being picked up on the street are still taken to the detention center. They're still being kept safe within prisons and jails instead of taken into environments that are conducive to healing. And then often in these detention centers in the jail, they're being re-victimized, they're being re-trafficked, they're being recruited by other girls, and the cycle just starts all over again. So I think that really refocusing on the bad kids, we all can do something about that. We all can mentor somebody in our world that needs mentorship, who doesn't have that adult that pays attention to them, who doesn't have anyone they can trust and that loves them. So we do a lot of that work with the girls in the detention centers. We do a lot of that work, and really what we do is we're there. We just show up. We're there every week. We're there at the same time, and we're there to talk to them, to listen to them. Sometimes we don't make a lot of strides, and we see girls released, and then they disappear, and we don't see them again until they get get, you know, and then until they get picked up again and they're back within the juvenile detention center. But again, then we're there again, and they see our face and they know who we are. And the hope is that they've seen us enough and they get tired enough of the life that at some point they call us and say, hey, I'm done. Get me out of this and help me. And that's when we really provide long-term services, when the healing journey can really begin, when we provide longer-term therapeutic services and trauma therapy to help them get out of that trauma bond and really begin their life.
Okay, we'd like to open it up now to take your questions.
Great. I'm actually going to take the first question, if I might. But first, I want to say, Teresa, thank you for being here and for being so candid and honest with all of us. Your strength is really, it's really something. So thank you for being here. And buy her book. Buy her book. Yeah. So my question, actually, Diane, I'd like to take it back to where you started and have any of you talk about this. You mentioned that Ohio ranks 5th in the nation in terms of incidents of human trafficking. Can you talk a little bit about the why? Why is Ohio such a prolific state when it comes to human trafficking? And if you have questions, just raise your hand. I'll bring your microphone.
I'll take a little bit of a step first. One thing that is true with any hidden activity is it's very hard to know exactly who's ranking where. I've heard one of the ways that we monitor how much trafficking is going on is how many calls are being made to the Human Trafficking National Hotline, and I believe Ohio was number 4 recently in that. So we know there are a lot of cries for help from Ohio. When we had our hearings, we held them in Toledo because Toledo is considered a, both, and this terminology is very revealing, a harvesting city as well as a distribution city. So there, when there's wealth inequality, when there are poor areas, that's a place that there's what's called harvesting. These are sophisticated people who are, you know, criminals, and they know they can get people with very little investment, you know, paying for nails, paying for hair. Toledo is also located by 2 interstates are there, and it's near a border with Canada. There's a lot of movement there, and that is considered an absolute hub. But as I was saying before, I heard Steve Demelbach talk about a case he did involving a Starbucks right around the corner from me. So there are, Ohio is just a city, a place that there's a lot of movement in and out. There's a lot of poverty in Ohio. Drugs are, you know, that's another area where we are real high up in the opioid crisis epidemic, and a lot of the time, one of the ways traffickers ensnare people is through drug addiction. So I'd like to, that's my answer.
Yeah, the FBI has stated if you have certain things like extensive highway systems, we got a lot of these girls are getting transported through truck stops. We have the 50 amount of truck stops in any other state. Other risk factors would be large, or lots of the colleges and universities. Lots of big immigrant populations, international borders. I mean, right here in Cleveland, you can either go towards Toledo, Detroit, you could go towards, you know, Buffalo and Niagara. You can come up visiting like that and be gone. Casinos, strip clubs, you know, tourist areas. So on that list, you have all of that right here in Cleveland.
Okay. I see a question right over there. And Becky's going to come with the microphone because
I'm just curious, as you mentioned these borders, what is happening at the borders to address this?
That's not my specialty.
Yeah, mine not me either. No, sorry.
I know there are border enforcement people looking at it. I don't know how, let me see. provided. There is an there are some U.S. Resources devoted to that, but I'm sorry, I don't know what specifically they are.
I have two questions. One, are there any inpatient facilities for, where they can get long-term help in Ohio or in the Midwest? And the second question that I have is, why aren't some of these 24-hour motels, if that, or just 1-hour motels, declared to be nuisances and close them up?
So, yeah, thank you. We have several shelters, I would call them. I would say an inpatient facility. There's 2 for children, for girls in Ohio that will help them be as a long-term residential program. And I know our coach Hugh Jackson here in Cleveland is starting a foundation and teaming up with Salvation Army and a collaborative initiative with the hopes of building a nice big facility as well for women. But it's definitely something, like she was saying, when we, when the police recover somebody, where do you take them? You take them to jail, you take them to juvie. Why? And so housing, therapeutic services, those kinds of things are essential and much, much needed. And then the second question,
Well, the second question had to do with covering some of these places as
sure.
a public nuisance.
Right, and I'm really big proponent of that. I don't know if it's happened in Cleveland. I think it might have one judge might have closed down a hotel. We have a judge in Columbus that has closed down many hotels because there were so many calls to the police, and they were disregarding, any of them. They were not helping. And he said, "This is, we're taxing our resources." And so I know several judges that are doing that, just shutting them down. And I think that's the right thing to do. So we need to have more action steps like that.
You mentioned the 2 places. Could you give the names of those places?
The 2 hotels?
No, not the hotels, the facilities that.
Oh, yes.
Shelter.
One is called Grace Haven. And the other is called the Daughters Project. Those are specifically for teenagers who've been trafficked. There's a home, the Tiffin, the Sisters and Shelter, as in Tiffin. There's a few around. Yeah. So.
But he's asking where
They're undisclosed locations. They're on the western side of Ohio. Go to their website, Grace Haven, and I can get you that information. Or the other one is the Daughter Project.
And you touched on what was really evident when we had these hearings in Toledo, that the amount of trauma that the people have gone through was extreme. I mean, it was, as Teresa mentioned, I mean, multiple rapes in one night, that's just one day. So these were repeated traumas over and over and over for the people, and recovering from that takes a lot of resources and time. There are a lot of medical providers who volunteer their time to work with victims, and there was a lot of discussion about how, again, hotels and truck stops where Teresa devotes her resources is one area that is looked at, but many of the doctors in emergency rooms also are being trained how to spot people who have had been trafficked, and so they're being trained to spot them and to involve law enforcement.
Can I say something about that? Because I think that's kind of where we, again, have to make a huge shift in mindset, and where we can't expect that just because we know we're safe people for those girls and women, that those girls know that as well. What the trafficker has put in their head is that no one is safe. I'm not safe, you're not safe, the hospital's not safe, the police is not safe, nowhere else can they be safe but with the trafficker. And that is that horrific trauma bonding where, just taking someone, putting them into residential treatment and expecting that 6 months later they're better, it's that paradigm we can't apply. It doesn't work, unfortunately. So it's a very, very time-consuming process. And again, takes us to show up, be trustworthy, earn that trust, earn that respect over years sometimes. So I just want to add that because I think it's important to know.
I was going to ask about advocacy. You mentioned safe harbor law. What other laws and anything in the works or anything, if you could wave your magic wand, what should we support that you would see would help victims and eradicate this?
I got you. So my passion is going after the demand. So we can rescue girls every day of the week, right? All the prosecuting attorneys want to go for the big fish, the big trafficker, put them away. That's really hard to do. And really what we need to go is for the middleman. And that's where I like to see our laws get stronger. In our country, it is illegal to buy sex and to sell sex. You can't do it, it's a misdemeanor, all right? But 90% of all prostitution arrests are of the female. Now, we're saying you're a bad girl, you're out there doing this, I'm not seeing her as a victim. So what if we change this? And what if we said, you know what, if you're caught buying a woman or buying a person, you're gonna go to jail. Instead of that $150 misdemeanor fine, it's now a $5,000 fine. Oregon, California, Washington have some really hefty fines for a first-time offense for prostitution of somebody buying someone. They want to have a $10,000 first-time offense. Do you think that might stop somebody from buying a prostitute? And not knowing that she's maybe really being trafficked? Yeah, I think so. It's public record, putting it on a billboard, their picture, in the Sunday newspaper. I run a John school in Michigan now because there's no schools out there in Michigan. There's only like 2 in Ohio, if that say, if you will arrest a man for doing this, we will re-educate him and we will make him understand that she's a human being, and maybe you thought she was 18 because she said that, or she's 17. Now that's a felony. But we have yet to have any law enforcement arrest the men and refer them to our program. So to me, this is a huge problem. It is the easiest way to fix this problem. So if I had a magic wand, that's the law that I would enact. So it was strengthened.
And Ohio has done a lot recently. They have had a human, they've made a lot of strengthened the laws in our state. We were terrible, but they have brought it up. They've had the Human Trafficking Task Force, and they have revised a number of the laws. There still are some changes that need to be made legislatively. Yes.
Thank you, Diane. A couple of very quick questions. You noted that Brown's coach Hugh Jackson is involved in leading a fundraising drive to help establish a structure where treatment can be offered to young women who've been trafficked. Other than obviously not participating as on the demand side, what other things can men specifically do to play a role in ending or at least greatly mitigating this scourge? That's one question. The other question, please, I apologize please if I'm being intrusive, but how long were you trafficked? How long did it take you to kind of regain equilibrium? And what is the recidivism rate when it comes to young women who've been trafficked and later, because resources haven't been provided or their self-esteem hasn't been burnished, returned?
Great questions. So I was trafficked for a year and a half to 2 years. So it was the middle of my sophomore year of high school until the end of my junior year when we moved that summer. And even after escaping, it's not like, okay, everything's hunky-dory and, I went out to college and stuff, but still suffered extreme PTSD and Stockholm syndrome, depression, and so it is an ongoing battle. I don't think you ever heal 100% from this. I have good days, I have bad days, and we're in counseling now. but the recidivism rate for women going back into the life is huge. I don't even know if we don't even know the number of how high that is. But because she doesn't have any other options. I mean, I was blessed because, and I had other options. I had education, I had parents, things like that. But most of these women don't have the resources that I did, which is why I'm so passionate on advocacy and helping them get that now. So that answered that question. What men can do, it really is going to take men to fix this. I mean, I speak all around the country, and it's 99% women in the audience, and it's hard. It's hard because I learned, somebody told me one time, the easiest thing a man can do is to tell his daughter she's beautiful every day. And we're so worried about her being vain and stuck up and everything. But if you're not going to say it, somebody else is. And then also raising your sons to not objectify women. I have 2 daughters and a little boy, and we talk about this all the time. He's now in college, but talking to them about the pimp culture. They think it's funny. A lot of them don't know that a pimp is a human trafficker. He's a slave owner, And so talking to boys about Grand Theft Auto, these games, that what's going on around the cosmopolitan magazines, the checkout. I mean, we're getting really in over our heads. Social media, the internet. Parents really need to raise the bar. We go, we get a college degree, we want to live in the nice suburbs, and we go and send our kids to good schools. And we think they're safe. But my parents thought I was safe too. And so we're busy with soccer, we're busy with women, we're lucky to get dinner on the table. But we don't get our kids' cell phones, numbers of their friends' parents. We have we've really done a bad job of this. And because of that, these guys are winning. So there's a lot that as a village that we can do. I was just thinking of the other day, when I would sneak out of my house, I ran through my backyard, through my neighbor's yard to wait for the car to pick me up. Midnight, several nights a week, school nights. And the neighbor would be sitting there watching TV in his living room and never said anything to my parents. Do you think I might be not sitting here if he had said something? I might not be. So it's really simple things that we can do.
Sorry to ask a number of questions. I find this interesting, fascinating. Knowing people who have served both as the pimp and as the slave. But what about parents? Okay, I mean, you said you had supportive parents. I imagine sometimes parents have a very difficult time accepting what their daughter may have done. And, I mean, if they came back like you came back and said you had supportive parents, but were they, how do they handle this?
I think supportive is the word I think I had good parents. They were busy parents. They, probably weren't as supervising as they should have been. I'm sure there's a few people in this room that probably have their house in high school. Wasn't hard to do in my house, especially when your life's on the line. But I don't think that they were invested fully, and that's back in the day, late in the 70s when, it was just different. We weren't even as busy and stuff back then. But I know when I talk to them about it, they feel very guilty that they missed that. I mean, what parent wouldn't, right? But all of us as parents have missed something with our kids, This is not good, but so they feel very guilty they missed it, but there's nothing they can do to change it, is what I tell them. So they're kind of of the mentality too, where bad things happen to people. Geez, you have a good life. Let's just go on and, it's kind of, it could be embarrassing to them, I think. I think they're kind of ashamed of it a little bit, but I don't let them harbor all that because I just want to fix this now. When I was going through that, I thought I was the only one that whatever was being sold at night. I mean, I didn't know if anybody else. For 30 years, I didn't know what happened to me was called human trafficking. But it was at that moment when I did learn that I was like, this has got to stop. And I even still at that moment thought, nobody's got a story like mine though. It's all these other girls. And I kept meeting woman after woman after woman who said, I was in high school too. My story's just like yours. And that is when it was like, it doesn't matter what my parents did or didn't do. It doesn't matter what they missed. It's like, let's go forward here and try to prevent this happening anymore.
Are there support groups for parents like alcohol, Al-Anon, and all those kinds of things?
There are not any support groups for parents. I have a dream that was my mom would do something like that, but that's not her journey. But I think that is a fantastic idea.
And there are also, we've talked a lot about girls, but there are a lot of boys who, especially boys who have a different sexual identity than normal. I don't want to use the word normal. A standard heterosexual male, if they're trans or homosexual gay children, a lot of times the parents are very rejecting. That's what made me think of it. And you heard the statistic about the minute it's within 48 hours of a child running away, they are contacted by a trafficker. That just was shocking to me. And for many of the laws right now, they're not people who will go look for a missing child until a certain amount of time has passed. And especially these teenagers, the parents can't really even have any law enforcement brought to bear in finding them. And in our hearings, there was a suggestion that maybe retired FBI people maybe they could go and try and find these children or these runaways, because if we don't get the runaways within this narrow window, they are going to be lured into being trafficked. And
one of the big problems that I think Cleveland's working on right now too with the task force is that when a kid is called in for missing, you wait your time. Many of these kids on the National Missing and Exploited website or our Attorney General's website do not have photos. And I can't put a kid on a missing children's poster if I don't have a photo and yet they're missing. And so there's a breakdown in our system right now where we need law enforcement doesn't have time to go out and go to school and go to the parents and the foster care to get that picture. But we need that picture on the website so we can find them. And so that's like a really big issue right now too with the missing children, because the longer they're out there, the faster they're going to be trafficked.
I have 3 young men that graduated from high school, and I was very involved in the high school with them. And we had to take pictures of our kids in the high school because of this. The high schools have to be involved and have to teach these kids of the dangers. When my kids were in 5th grade, every year they would take their picture and they would tell them why. And I think the high schools, and we have to teach these kids because they're being inundated with so much garbage. We have to teach them to be careful. And I think that's where we're missing the link, because a lot of these kids don't realize that, talking to somebody in the mall is not a safe thing.
That's great. Thank you. I think we have time for a few more questions.
Hi, can you talk about the role of the internet in recruiting people and how we can combat that?
Ooh, that's a really challenging point that you bring up, because it's such an unwieldy beast that, where to even start. But I think Teresa kind of hit on it earlier. It goes back to, as parents, we need to be aware what our kids are looking at. I mean, we have had several cases where girls were recruited through Facebook. I mean, it's the same, and it starts the same way as a person, right? It starts as a friendship. There's someone who's paying attention to me. There's someone who's giving me, showing me love that I think about from anywhere else. Then I start meeting with this guy, and whoop, there we are in the situation. So I think it goes back to knowing what our kids are looking at, being involved, understanding who they're talking to. I mean, if you're a parent and your kid has a Facebook account, you gotta confront them. It's gonna be part of it, and it's invasive, and it stinks for the kids, and they don't have digital privacy, but that's the price we all have to pay. So it's a very unreal piece, and more we see more and more is taking it to the internet. That page is utilized way more than in-person recruiting. So it's definitely very dangerous.
But they can talk to people through gaming as well, so they can be playing an online game, some shoot 'em up game, and they're talking to other kids from around the country that they think are kids, right? So it's not even just their cell phone or just the Facebook. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that they can access other people. In Granville, Ohio, is one of my favorite little places. They 2 weeks ago, a 22-year-old guy went to the public library in Granville and tried to kidnap two 12-year-old girls, and he had been talking to one of them on the internet. So it happens just like that.
And backpage.com, for those of you who haven't heard about it, it's basically a trafficking site where women are bought and sold, and there's immunity from posters on, that is being addressed now in light of all of the scandal about Russia and who's buying things. That is going to be looked at, but it would shut down a number of sites that they basically say, we're just a bulletin board, we don't control what people post on that bulletin board. But it's notorious. It's known as a place that women are bought and sold.
Teresa, Kirsty, Van, thank you so much for joining us today and for really giving us a lot to think about, and I think a lot to talk about on what's really a critically important topic. Please join me in thanking our panelists.
Go for Teresa. Go get it.
Exactly. I was just going to say, over to Teresa. And if you want to continue this conversation more in an intentional way, we have a follow-on presentation that is a 3-hour CLE that's happening on Wednesday, November 29th, beginning at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. There's some information back. There's also information on our website at clemetropar.org to continue the conversation. We'll also be back here in December on the second Tuesday of the month for our next installment of the Hot Talks conversation. We're finalizing that topic now, so stay tuned. You can check out on our website at /Hot Talks for more, and also check out, if you're a member, check out all of our daily communications. We'll be sure to get to the details. So thank you again for joining us today, and I wish you all good luck. And thank you for really giving us something important to think about with our families when we get together the next week or so. So thank you.